you all very much for coming to this presser. My name is Patience and I'll be facilitating the discussion today. We are going to hear a statement from the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Election Support Network, Mr. Andrew Makoni, who's sitting on my left. I also have up here on my right, Ellen Degani from the ZESN Secretariat, and Mr. Oke Machisa on my far left from Zimrice, who are also going to be here to respond to any questions that may come from you. I'll just hand over now to Mr. Makoni to give us the statement.
Thank you, Patience, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for gracing this press conference. Before we go into the meet, I just wanted you to show us by show of hands how many of you have registered yet in this BVR exercise. So I see that about a third of you have already registered. So a lot needs to happen, especially given that you are publicizing this process and you must be leading by example. So I hope that you go to register and vote, and you also take your spouses, take your friends, take family with you to register for this important exercise. The Zimbabwe Election Support Network, which is a coalition of 32 non-governmental organizations promoting democratic elections in Zimbabwe, is observing the biometric voter registration exercise, which commenced on the 10th of October 2017. The network will deploy a total of 2,000 observers to cover all the 4 phases of the Blitz, and to date it has already deployed 938 observers in the areas already covered by the BVR exercise. With phase 1 having been concluded on the 25th of October 2017, ZESN observes under this phase and reported on a number of issues, including issues of intimidation of registrants and observers, inadequate voter education and mobilization, challenges with the services of Commission of Oaths, who were not always present at most registration centers. On the first day, we observed the opening times and the registration procedures that were being employed. We observed that at 98% of the registration centers where observers were stationed, the voter registration process was conducted smoothly, with registration officials duly following procedures for registration. We observed that 98% of the registration centers opened and closed at stipulated times, thereby affording potential registrants ample time to present themselves for registration. At 99% of the registration centers where ZESN observers, everyone who successfully registered had their fingerprints and facial photographs taken and was issued with a registration slip. However, we observed certain challenges with the process, particularly with the BVR kits that were being used. At most centers where ZESN observed, the BVR equipment functioned fairly well. However, there were reports of equipment failure at some centers. ZESN also received reports that transition and transportation of the BVR equipment from phase 1 to phase 2 did not proceed smoothly. As a result, a number of registration centers failed to register voters on the commencement of phase 2 on 29 October 2017 due to the late arrival of registration officials, as some of the BVR kits could not be immediately used because they were not charged. Examples of registration centers that experienced these challenges of receiving kits that were not charged included Nyaradzai Hall in Shavane Ward 8, Berengwa East Ward 3 and 5, Berengwa South Ward 27, and Nyanga South Ward 28, amongst other centers. In all registration centers, we observed a number of cases where some people were turned away for reasons that included having defaced identity documents, presenting photograph IDs and driver's licenses as identity documents, not having IDs and appropriate proof of residence. Sorry about that. Yes, sorry about that. I'll take that again. I had not realized that the statement is proceeding to the next page. Perhaps rewinding to pre-filing of affidavit forms. Throughout the first phase, ZESN received reports of political leaders, including members of parliament, ward councillors and traditional leaders, distributing pre-signed affidavits to their supporters. This conduct is a criminal offence and violates Section 8 of the Justices of Peace and Commissioners of Oaths Act, Chapter 7, :09, which provides that a person taking an oath must personally appear before a Commissioner of Oaths. These disturbing reports of pre-filed affidavits need to be investigated by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission as well as the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, and corrective action taken against the offenders. It is critical that all potential registrants freely register in this important exercise. Thus, ZESN is concerned by this practice, which has fueled intimidation of registrants who are giving the pre-filed affidavits on condition that after registering, they submit serial numbers on their registration slips to certain political players. These incidents have been reported in a number of areas. For instance, in Ward 17 and 19 of Brewa South constituency, Rushinga Ward 4, and at Iminyale Center in Mpopom. I must also add that in my constituency, which started the registration exercise on the 29th of October 2017, which is Harare North, such incidents were also reported by some registrants. ZESN observed a general low turnout among youth and persons with disabilities. The low turnout of persons with disabilities may be attributed to a number of issues such as inadequate awareness programs and challenges in accessing registration centers. Overall, indications are that the Matabeleland region recorded the lowest turnout in phase 1. We observed that at Sinansenkwe Business Center in Binga North, Ward 4, not a single person presented themselves at the registration center on 19 October 2017. Low turnout figures were also recorded in Mashonaland East at Shamba, Deep Tank in Maramba Fungwe Ward, that is Ward 6, where only 2 persons registered on the 18th of October, while at Kanzire Primary School in the same ward, only 1 person registered. I think this reported low turnout is also confirmed by place reports. I was reading in today's newspaper that in Mwenezi and Chibi constituencies, a paltry figure of 43,000 potential voters had successfully registered by the end of the first phase of the BVR exercise. I think the reasons cited there included migration of some of the citizens to neighboring South Africa in search of greener pastures. So 43,000 for 3 different constituencies is quite a low figure in the first phase, and we hope that the situation improves. On my part, when I decided to register on the 29th at a registration center which is close to my home, it was a simple walk into the registration center with my brother. There was no one to register, and we were saved in a couple of minutes, and that compelled me to send word out there that the exercise is in town, it is in our constituency, and that message which I sent out attracted more than 20 registrants who were able to also to come during that afternoon to register and vote, which speaks to what efforts we can make as individuals also to augment the work which is being done by ZEC and by ZESN and others to raise awareness of this important voter registration exercise. According to statistics provided by ZEC, approximately 1.2 million voters were registered under the first phase. ZESN welcomed the provision of the statistics by ZEC and further appealed to the Electoral Commission to provide registration statistics for the BVR process, preferably in granular form and disaggregated by ward, sex and age for easy of seeing where the challenges are. ZESN also calls upon ZEC to post daily reconciliations of voter registration statistics outside each registration center and weekly updates on the ZEC website. Such information will help to enhance transparency and confidence among stakeholders in the process, as well as inform public and inform the civics and voter education efforts which are being undertaken by various stakeholders. Now, moving on to register observations around those who were turned away. In all the registration centers, we observed a number of cases where some people were turned away for reasons that included having defaced identity documents, presenting photograph IDs and driver's licenses as identity documents, not having IDs and appropriate proof of residence, being under the age required to register as a voter, having expired passports and an alien status on their IDs. At 100% of the voter registration centers observed, we noted that all turned away registrants were duly requested to fill in the BVR 5 form for turned away voters. And as the 31st of October 2017, ZEC reported that a total of 32,849 potential registrants had been turned away, representing approximately 2.3% of the total registered voters. We've also noticed something which is worrying us. We observed that there's been an announcement by traditional leaders endorsing the ruling party for the forthcoming harmonized elections. We note that such pronouncements are in contravention of Section 281, subsection 2 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which states that traditional leaders must not belong to any political party nor act in a partisan manner. We observed during the first phase that traditional leaders were issuing out proof of residence affidavits and later stating that the registrants reside in areas under their jurisdiction. We reiterate our previous calls for traditional leaders to play their leadership role in a non-partisan manner, as this is critical for the creation of a conducive environment that allows for the enjoyment by their subjects of the right to register and freely participate in electoral processes. We also observed that some of our observers, the observers who were deployed during the first phase, were denied access into the registration centers by ZEC's ward registration supervisors, insisting that they first report at the ZEC district offices. Observers were denied access in Zishavane, at Nyaradzai Hall in Ward 8, at Lundi Hospital in Ward 10, and Weleza in Ward 13. In Ward 10 of Mwenez West, as well as at Tekwani High School in Ululima East. ZESN, through its member organization, the Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights, engaged ZEC, resulting in the observers being allowed to observe. ZEC should ensure that its officers facilitate the observation of electoral processes, including voter registration exercise, as this is crucial for the promotion of transparency and credibility in the electoral processes. Of concern also to ZESN are incidents where accredited observers were intimidated for observing the BVR process. For instance, in Chipinge Central, a ZESN observer was threatened and intimidated by the ward councillor and his supporters, resulting in the center being closed by the registration officials who felt that the situation was threatening to get out of hand. In Epworth, Ward 2, at the local board offices, a physically challenged ZESN observer was also forced out of the registration center. And this is an issue really we want the electoral body to look into and ensure that in the next phases those things do not occur. We have also received disturbing reports of cases where potential registrants were being misinformed that the BVR process or system has the ability to review the voters' preferences on voting day. There is therefore need for ZEC and other electoral stakeholders to amplify civic and voter education in order to demystify the BVR process and ensure that voters receive accurate information which will allow them to make informed choices. As ZESN, we reiterate our call for the establishment of a conducive political environment that is devoid of intimidation and violence during the registration exercise and during the period leading to the 2018 elections. We urge ZEC to facilitate the creation of a multi-party liaison committee. These committees will be an appropriate forum to elicit the support of politicians in adhering to stipulated code of conduct for political parties in all electoral processes. The following are the recommendations we make. Firstly, that the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission and the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission must investigate the incidents of intimidation of registrants and the distribution of pre-filed affidavits, pre-commissioned affidavits by the political parties and traditional leaders. I think all of us saw some of these affidavits that were being circulating on the social media, in the social media. And secondly, there is need for standardization of operations for all BVR ward supervisors with regard to how they relate with observers to ensure that there are no obstructions to the work of observers during the registration process. And thirdly, disaggregated statistics of registered voters should be availed on a daily basis to observers and interested stakeholders as a way of enhancing transparency and accountability, as well as to inform stakeholders involved in civic and voter education to make appropriate adjustments to voter education interventions. Fourth, ZEC should facilitate the creation, as I have already indicated, of multi-party liaison committees that will discuss issues related to political parties, actors, and supporters adherence to the stipulated code of conduct during the registration period and purpose of a BVR exercise. 6. Recognizing the important role that the media plays in electoral processes, ZESN calls upon the media to augment efforts by ZEC and CSOs in providing accurate information to demystify the BVR process and to encourage all eligible citizens to turn out in their numbers to register and to vote. 7. ZESN recommends that ZEC engages organizations working with people with disabilities in order to facilitate their registration and participation. And 8. ZEC and CSOs should amplify voter education efforts to ensure that the public is well informed about the process and to further reduce the number of turned away potential registrants. And lastly, in view of the emerging challenges with regard to the proof of residence, ZESN reiterates its previous position for ZEC to put in place additional mechanisms to further ease the proof of residence requirements, such as conferring voter registration officials with powers to commission affidavits. And I think the last issue ZEC must also consider is whether this requirement for proof of residence is necessary. I thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Makoni. I'll now invite questions to the presentation by Mr. Makoni, and the different panelists up here will be available to answer all questions that you have. Okay, yes.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. Garikai, your questions? Yes, indeed. We have been engaging the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. Our engagement with the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission is a continuous process. Since this exercise commenced, we have written no less than 7 letters to the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission raising issues to do with how the process is being conducted and the issues we raise in our statement. We will not stop. Sometimes we don't receive any positive responses, but that does not stop us from continuing to engage with the relevant authorities over these issues. Today we'll also be sending letters to the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission as well as to ZEC to deal with some of the issues we have raised, including this issue relating to traditional leaders and the threats or intimidation to voters, which we have observed over the last few days. Then regarding the low turnout of people, whether ZEC will be able to meet its target of 7 million, it is very difficult to tell, given that we only have slightly above 1.2 million registrants at the end of the first phase, and we are only remaining with less than 2 months before this exercise the BVR blitz comes to an end. If the situation does not improve, there is a possibility that by that particular deadline, perhaps the figure may not be achieved. But as you are all aware, the process of registration will not end on the 19th of December 2017. It will continue. It is a continuous process. It will continue until close to the nomination court sitting, so I understand. So, you know, we want to give ZEC this opportunity to try and ensure that the estimated figure of potential voters is reached. That is why we are also calling upon the press to play its part to ensure that this awareness campaign we are talking about is increased. You know, we do not see any billboards in the city to talk about these processes. You know, this exercise moved to a number of the suburbs in the country, particularly here in Harare, on the 29th of October 2017. One would have expected, you know, to see billboards, particularly leading to those areas where this exercise is taking place, you know, alerting people that the exercise is in their area, and you know, perhaps setting out in bold the requirements. There are so many billboards we see, but we don't see any billboards by ZEC. CSOs must also make every effort to ensure that potential voters are reached. As individuals must also play our part. I've just indicated that when I realized the low turnout at my a center close to where I was, I I took a deliberate effort as an individual to alert citizens I knew who are in the same constituency to come and register to vote. And in 2 hours, in slightly over 2 hours, over 20 people answered that call. Imagine if each one of us are able to do the same. We would perhaps assist or augment ZEC in ensuring that the number of voters that are estimated to be registered by the close of the exercise is reached. I would defer to my colleague to perhaps respond to Jeffrey Moyo's question.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Indeed, I agree with Jeffrey that a number of incidences where a registrant is posted in a wrong ward or in a wrong constituency, those are actually issues that are coming up. But let me just say, it is again all to do with education, and that should be coming from ZEC, and also that should be coming from us as civil society, where we actually indicate and tell the people that over and above the documents that you have, you need to know your constituency and you need to know your ward. Circumstances that are leading to one getting a wrong ward or wrong constituency is because they might go to register without knowing which constituency they are coming from and which ward they are coming from. And at the end of the day, we also want to encourage ZEC to have officers that pay attention to individuals who might not even know their constituencies and their wards when they get there. So it is important that when you reach to an official who is going to register you, when you just say that I stay in Belvedere and you mention your road, the machine should actually indicate to you that probably the next or the nearest polling station to your house or to where you stay is this polling station. But in the event that probably it's a tent in a rural area, there are no streets and so forth, there is need for us to educate our citizens that it is important for them to go to the registration office with the knowledge of their ward as well as their constituency and probably the nearest polling station.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Machisa. For those who are not here when I introduced the panel, Mr. Machisa is a ZESN board member. Maybe I can take another round of questions. Please, Privilege.
Very pertinent questions being raised, very difficult questions also being raised. What will be our opinion when it comes to the political will around ensuring that the voter registration exercise is apolitical, is non-partisan? Well, it's difficult to tell because political players have also a role to play when it comes to the registration exercise, judging by what the ZEC chairperson said at the inception, calling upon political parties, civic society, and all stakeholders to be involved in the voter registration exercise. But I think the challenge then with political parties is where to draw the line between merely facilitating the registration of citizens and then perhaps influencing how they then ought to exercise their right to vote once they are registered. That is why we have a problem with the issue of allowing political parties to be actively engaged close to registration centers, apart from those that are assisting. I understand the commissioner's oath of also assisting with the registration process. I mean, itself through facilitating those proofs of residence. They must not be allowed close to the polling station. The registration centers. There is one particular registrant who took this gentleman single-handedly when they offered a pre-signed affidavit to him. He had this proof of residence in the form of his bill from his home. he decided to there question the police officers who were sitting close to this gentleman, who had, they were sitting particularly at a desk next to the police officers who were there, and it would appear he thought that the police were really in bed with these political players, but he insisted that they must leave. He said to the police, let these people leave the registration centers, and indeed the police obliged and evicted in court these gentlemen, who then set their small area, or their small kind of registration area 200 meters away from the polling station, which again is not good enough, because we don't want to see them any close to any polling station. We continue to call upon ZEC to ensure that no political parties influence, no political parties are allowed to ask registrants who have registered to give them the serial number of their registration slips. So this is something which we continue to engage ZEC on. Unfortunately, as a civic society organization, there's not much that we can do but continue to engage the system, alerting them of these challenges we citizens are facing, and calling upon them to address it. But also calling upon the political players themselves to desist from this kind of conduct. Okay, there was one more question.
Yes, since it's more a programming issue, I was going to ask Ellen to respond to the second question. So maybe over to you, Ellen.
Okay, thank you very much. So with regards to the issues around people with disabilities, as ZESN and our members, we are currently developing materials. We received our funding a bit late, but we are currently developing materials targeting the people with disabilities. And we are working in particular with the NASCO, the National Association for Physically Handicapped, to develop the materials. But also in our statement, we've mentioned the challenges that some of the people living with disabilities are facing, issues like access to some of the registration centers which are not very accessible. So we have also engaged ZEC to work with these organizations so that they have a deeper understanding of their challenges and also address some of those challenges. And also even in terms of voter education, to also tailor make their voter education initiatives to target people living with disabilities. So that's what we are doing as civil society, ZESN and its members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ellen. The panelists are available for further engagement, so if you need to have any interviews or conduct any interviews with the panelists, they are available. Thank you all very much for coming to this press conference, and we've reached the end of the process.
For these and other stories, visit our website www.263chat.com. Follow us on Twitter @263chat and like our Facebook page 263chat.